Wait, I cast hold person. Steve smiles. Yeah, good idea to do that first. No, on you. Today we have two stories from one GM who had to deal with a player that ruins things for everyone and a player who later decides to ignore the guests in his home. Ultimately, he quits. Let's get cracking. First time I've quit on a group as the DM. 2 for 1 stories. This campaign has been going on for the last 6 months, although we only played for 5 of those months. And today, I, the DM, am quitting running for these players, specifically 2 of them. But because of the unique situations that I won't divulge, it is at least temporarily preventing me from running from all of them. The campaign was in a Dark Souls setting, but not nearly as desolate, deserted, or lonely, but equally dark and dangerous. However, with high magic and steampunk level technology. After the first month, I started devoting my entire Fridays to this group, spending time from when I woke up at 10 a.m. to my departure time at 3 p.m. setting up maps, lists, NPCs, encounters, anything I think I may need for the night, or even for side quests if the characters decide to wander off and follow their own desires instead of following the main story. As the DM, I didn't think I needed to quit on a group, especially one that had 2 of my good friends in it, but I was very wrong. The group consisted of me, Brandon, Wizard and guys whose house we played at, his cousin, Andrew Barbarian, Andrew's dad, Brandon's uncle, Steve, the rogue, my friend Jordan, Paladin, and my friend Terrence, the fighter. From previous groups, we met every Friday without fail, until recently. First story I have is about Steve. Steve is around 40, and he claims to have played Pathfinder since before I was born. I'm 24. Let's not talk about how long Pathfinder has been out. But he never remembers any of the rules. I can't tell if he's never remembered because he's actually never played, or because he never shows up unless he's absolutely drunk. Steve played a neutral evil rogue, and was the primary source of frustration and slowdown in the campaign. He always did something absolutely unexplainably stupid. The group came across a warrior of sunlight named Father Jeff, performing in the arena. He was slaying monsters in the Grand City's arena to help rebuild his religion's reputation after the war. He recognized Terrence and Jordan's shared religion emblems. They were Dark Moon, which was an equally secret religion in this game, as it was intended to be in Dark Souls. Jeff knew about this because of his high religion and rank within the Warriors of Sunlight. When they approached him for an autograph after the fight, and befriended him, he told them his trip route, and even said once his series of shows was over, he'd take them to the Warrior of Sunlight's base of operations, and introduce them and give them some things for their journey. He even tells the group he'll find them some nice things since they are trusted by the Dark Moon. They depart in good spirits and run into him a few towns later. Their desire for gold and taking up in-quest board contracts pulled them away from their initial plans to just follow him on his trip until they get their nice free stuff. They don't see Jeff himself though, and they don't see any of his attendants, Sunlight Knights, or squires that they recognize. Steve walks over to the caravan and asks where his free stuff is. The squire he approaches is obviously confused, never seeing this man nor knowing of him. He yells at the squire, runs past him to the cart, and tries to climb into it to find his stuff that he was promised, despite everyone at the table explaining that the free stuff was at the end of the series of shows Jeff was playing, not the next time they saw him. A knight notices and pulls him out, and he actually asks, "Can I stab this guy for touching me before we roll initiative?" The party themselves stop the game and tell him he is actually being stupid. He pulls back his planned movements and gets yelled at in character. They meet with Jeffrey, chat for a bit, and then separate again. During one of their traveling phases, I rolled 3 consecutive nat 20s for their encounter, so I gave them a Merchant of Wonders. By this point, they had unearthed one of the Dark Moon relics, a tome of horrors that listed a strong amount of magical, dangerous, and threatening creatures that the Dark Moon had dealt with, encountered, or even thought worthy of noting. Brandon, the wizard, was reading the tome out loud as they traveled to familiarize himself with it to try and recall later instead of having to refer to the book. They encountered a merchant of wonders. I asked Brandon for a check. He passes, and he knows everything about this. I inform him of everything, including that he is basically a demigod when encountered within his own shop. He does not obey the rules of reality as they know it. My variation of it was basically a chaotic good genie who appeared as a Middle Eastern man. His shop traveled through another plane of existence and sometimes intersected with ours. So, as the group climbed into their cart and the flaps closed behind them, they were actually walking into this man's store. And out the door, they could see the exit from their cart. The players were 4th level, but had a good bit of gold for the character levels. So I threw up the shop sale area. 2 weapons they couldn't afford and were basically greater +5 magic weapons, just to know the things that this guy can have, and some lesser boots of haste, ring of protection, etc., for them to purchase now with their available gold from their side quests. They rolled 3 nat 20s, that is deserving of some good, decent stuff, in my honest opinion, even if it was chance. Once everyone was in the shop, the door closed. The genie welcomed them and told them to take their time and look around. They were discussing what to get and were talking about pooling and sharing gold. The genie was walking around showing them his wares and his non-magical items. They would be able to restock everything they could need here without limit. Without warning, Steve shouts, "I stab him!" He went to stab this man, and the entire shop turned to sand as the genie pushed them out of his reality. The sand covered them, and as it fell to the ground and revealed that they were all once again piled into their cart, now extra sandy, the party was furious. Steve defended his position with, "Well, if I got him, we could have had everything in the shop. But it doesn't matter anyway, it all turned to sand. None of it was real, he was trying to scam us." The party asked me to confirm, and I don't want to throw him under the bus, but he was absolutely incorrect. They asked to roll sense motive in hindsight to check the genie's motives. Andrew, his son, rolls a nat 20, and I tell him that based on Brandon's explanation from the tome and your own gut feelings, you are very confident that man was a legitimate salesperson and was intending to make a transaction with you. You do not believe the items were fake or that he had any ill intent. Steve responds with, "I don't believe him," referencing me, the DM, explaining what a nat 20 sense motive check reveals. "And if my idea worked, we would have had all that stuff to ourselves. I guarantee we would have had nothing but sand if we had bought an item." Fast forward over some smaller annoyances, stealing from the party, hiding gold he had, asking, "When are we gonna fight something?" during long periods of story-relevant role-playing. The party had fallen on hard times. Some kind of powerful threat is out there, and they seen the results as Father Jeff, an individual so solo strong he was taking on monsters the party struggled with together, was kidnapped by an unknown organization wielding strange, unfamiliar magic, weapons, and armor. Jeff was level 9. The party ran into him at level 2. At the time of this event, they were level 8 themselves, so about as strong as Jeff when he vanished. They hear of the young archmage prodigy of the Elven provinces. The strongest mage on the continent was looking for adventurers to take up a powerful quest for him, but they had to pass a test to prove that he wouldn't be just sending them to their deaths. And he is offering significant financial compensation for such an adventuring party, as well as covering the cost for the caravan and supplies himself. Through another multiple nat 20 in a row chance rolls, Andrew was an old friend of this mage, having saved him from the undead when the mage was new to spellcraft. They go talk to this guy and see he has a retainer, a bodyguard, someone trusted to by himself to protect the strongest mage on the continent. The retainer wears a poncho covering his weapons, but looks shady. They assume he's a rogue because of his leather armor and shady look. The bodyguard keeps to himself between the group, and the archmage is friends with one of their members. Anytime Andrew gets close to him to shake hands or walk beside him, the bodyguard just doesn't let him pass. Andrew takes no offense and negotiates with his old friend to let them skip the line for the test, and the archmage agrees. He says, "Step into this arena, and the test shall begin." As if finally realizing that the party was going to have some good fortune and that he hadn't done anything stupid in the last 20 minutes, he says, "I'm bored." As he turns to the point at the arena, "I want to pick his pocket." The whole group roars in protest before I even have time to process what Steve has said. Steve rolls sleight of hand and rolls a 2. The bodyguard rolls an 18 per perception, plus he was a level 13 gunslinger, so his modifier alone was enough to beat Steve's roll. He grabs Steve's hand roughly, not allowing him to reach farther or to pull it back, and asks Steve, "What do you think you're doing?" To which Steve replies, "And no, I'm not making this up. Don't worry, if I wanted to, I'd already killed you already." The bodyguard makes a grapple check and beats Steve and pins him to the ground. "I want to attack him," Steve says, and before I can say anything, Brandon chimes in. "Wait, I cast hold person." Steve smiles. "Yeah, good idea to do that first." "No, on you," Brandon says. Steve attempts a will save and fails, and is now paralyzed. Andrew picks up Steve, he was a barbarian, and moves him away from the bodyguard, who now has unholstered a heavily modified, literally glowing with magic, revolver. Brandon asks if he can spellcraft to see what's on it, and I let him. He fails the check with a roll of 4, with plus 16 from skills, but he asks the archmage, and he openly explains the long length of modifications and such he paid for and magical enhancements he put on himself to assist his bodyguard. The bodyguard has this gun trained on Steve, and I make sure to let everyone know without any room for doubt he has an action ready to fire his weapon at Steve if he does anything that he deems shady or potentially dangerous to his boss or others in the vicinity. Steve gets out of hold person and says he's moving to attack this man. I let him know that based on the positioning Andrew set him down in, that he would need to push past his party members first. Steve says, "Okay, why would that be a problem? They'll just move." Andrew, his son, again says, "No, we're not moving to let you attack this guy." Steve says, "Well, I attack Andrew then." And as if the God Emperor himself smiled upon me, without the DM screen up for all to see, I roll a nat 20 to hit Steve and easily confirm. This absolute monstrosity of a revolver deals roughly 137 damage and kills Steve 1.5 times over in a single shot. The bodyguard puts a bullet through Steve's head and he dies. The archmage then declines to give them the quest anymore because he was openly disgraced in front of the crowds gathering at his trial arena by showing trust to the party and then them trying to steal from him. The only reason he didn't call the authorities on the lot was because of Andrew saving his life in the past. They asked what the reward was that they missed out on. It was a 4,000 gold upgrade, 2 +1 upgrades on different items, or a single +2 upgrade on one item if it had +1 already, and 1,000 gold for the group. Again, on top of the funding costs for the caravan, some trusted mercenaries to protect the caravan, and all the supplies the caravan would possibly need, scrolls, potions, and a few magic wands included. Steve made a new character, a lawful good cleric, and he said he intended to resurrect his character. I asked them how the characters were related. They're not. Were they friends? No, this is a completely different guy. Have they met before? No, what's with all the stupid questions? Steve asked. Well, why would a cleric setting out adventuring for the express purpose of resurrecting someone he has never even met? I ask, and he takes it as an attack on him. He leaves, insisting the entire time that he's not upset. After this, despite him having a valid character set, and me telling him that he is still fine to come to play, me and the group don't hate him, he's just stupid. He instead drops Andrew off and then goes to the bar, which was his routine before picking up his son and coming to our game anyway. The second story is what happened recently, where I gave up on this group. Like I said before, I am hyper passionate about Pathfinder and my story I was building. But I wasn't a rules lawyer, often erring on the side of, well, that sounds really cool if you can pull it off. Sure, I'll allow it. Brandon had been spending more and more time obsessively poring over the internet to best optimize his character. I let people, especially new players, change their class or feats once in a while. No hard timeline. I've never actually been asked a second time, to be honest, if they find something that they believe would be more fun. He asked for and took advantage of this. In next session, he made a spellcraft check, rolled a 2, and he came out 47. I told him, that sounds incredibly high, but considering the check was for a legitimately mundane thing, seeing if the Tome of Horrors was magical or purely physical, it was a big journal essentially, so purely physical. Anyway, I'd allow it, but I wanted to see his character sheet afterwards. Terrence asked me and Brandon if he can allow Brandon to use Terrence's one-time change to optimize his character a bit more. I tell him, sure. It gets late, Brandon goes to the bathroom, and we decide to call it. I collect the notebooks I've given everybody, but Brandon's isn't there. Andrew says Brandon may have it upstairs in his room, cause he was working on it all week. I leave Terrence's and leave a note on it to send me his sheet on Discord. Even if it's just some pictures if he didn't want to write it down. Terrence sends me his new updated character sheet, and something seems off about it. I go through and rebuild it from the ground up, with all the same feats, magical items, and everything. And every single value that wasn't an attribute, strength, dex, con, int, whiz, charisma, etc., was 3 too high for no reason. I messaged Brandon asking if he did upgrade Terrence's sheet. Despite never answering me about his own sheet, he responds within 5 minutes telling me, yeah, he did, and he thinks Terrence is going to be broken OP. Brandon is a wizard, Terrence is a fighter. I tell him that all of Terrence's values were wrong and ask him if he knew that, and he doesn't respond to me. I don't hear from Brandon at all the next week. I send a message on Wednesday to send me his character sheet. He says he will, and it never comes. Friday rolls around. We go meet up at Brandon's again. I get there at 4:30, a little late all things considered, and Jordan's on Brandon's porch. He says he's been sitting there since he got off work an hour ago, and Brandon hasn't answered. But Jordan can't walk home from here because of how far it is. He had a coworker drop him off after Brandon confirmed he was both playing today and prepared for Jordan to come home after work. I try to call Brandon, and the door opens. He pretends he didn't just leave Jordan on the porch in 85-degree Fahrenheit weather, and doesn't give an answer as to what happened or why he didn't respond to the messages or calls from Jordan. We set up and order food, and everyone else shows up shortly after. Brandon goes upstairs to get his character sheet. We realize 20 minutes later he still hasn't come back down, nor have we heard the bathroom door close. Jordan goes upstairs to check on him, and he calls us up there. Brandon's door is open. He's asleep in the bed. We awkwardly discuss what to do and leave. I leave another note, this time on the floor outside of Brandon's room, that I need his character sheet even more after seeing that he was absolutely incorrectly fixing Terrence's sheet. Jordan grew up with Brandon. I did not. So I wasn't comfortable even going into his room to leave a note on a more visible place. Again, We leave, and I never hear from Brandon despite multiple texts to him. We got together the next week, and everything seemed back to normal. Andrew said next Friday he'd be out, and we agreed not to play that week for a break. We started to play. I asked Brandon for his character sheet for the 700th time. Brandon says he'll be back in a minute. He's going to go to the bathroom and grab it on the way back downstairs. Jordan is a smoker, so he goes for a cigarette outside, and I go with him. Andrew orders food. Jordan smokes 3 cigarettes, saying he was waiting for Brandon, and he'd put it out. And Brandon never came back down. Jordan put his 3rd cigarette out about halfway and went inside and upstairs. I follow him. He opens the door to Brandon's room, and Brandon is in his room playing games on his computer. Jordan doesn't even say anything. Calls his wife, and she picks him up, and he leaves. We ask Brandon for his contribution to our food ordering, and he throws me $4. I use that as a tip, and me and Andrew split the portion of the bill that was left by Brandon and Jordan. I take my portion of the food and leave. We talked about it after. Despite paying $4, Andrew, being the last to leave, left Brandon half of the pizza and 6 wings. We don't meet up that next week, cause we had agreed not to, and Andrew was out. Then Thursday, we were checking in on if we were playing or not. Brandon posted in our Discord that he wants to skip a few weeks because we have been playing non-stop, and he doesn't want to get bored with the game. Mind you, every time we've had to disperse because Brandon went upstairs and ignored us, in his own house. I had prepped and brainstormed and worked on the campaign content for that session, and once we started not playing during those sessions, I planned for future sessions for 4 to 6 hours minimum, and then hauled all my stuff: screens, extra dice, extra sheets, multiple books, hand-drawn maps, printed letters, and the vinyl battle map, whiteboards, markers, and the notebooks I gave to each player to keep track of their characters and everything, over to Brandon's for him to just pretend we aren't even at his house, and still not show me his character sheet. The end result here is I quit the group. I put 4 to 6 hours into preparing each session because I'm between semesters. I took 1 semester off, and I have nothing else better to do with my time. I don't expect the same from others, but if you invite me over to DM a game for you, at least sit at the table and play the game, not nap or play video games while we sit in your dining room awkwardly waiting for you in your own house. I think that player was dealing with video game addiction. He didn't sleep enough, and all he wanted to do was play a game. Addiction is no joke, and I know some people like to make fun of it, but people have died from it. As for Steve, I think he was dealing with the idea of being invincible. Some players like to think that there aren't any consequences for their actions. A GTA player, if you will. I mean, he was definitely in character since he was supposed to be evil, and I kind of don't know why the DM allowed for that. Anywho, what are your thoughts? Please let me know and comment below. If you like what you see, leave a like, pretty please subscribe as well, and ding that little bell. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.